Okay, so we're going to do Psi hacks for great relationships, approaching relationships with wisdom. I don't really love this Psi hacks title. I'm going to change that. Wisdom and Psi hacks don't seem to fit right. So we're going to learn some neat things about relationships. And actually, Jenny, you're going to learn a few different things than you learned before. So one of the things I'd love for you guys to write down, and that is something in the this is actually, I think, part of the assignment is where what is a big question you have about relationships? Just to see what we're wondering. And some of these things might be things that, I mean, some of the questions might be answered by this PowerPoint, but usually not. Usually people's questions are more specific, and we begin by kind of getting the basic overall view of working with relationships. But we can explore your questions about relationships. And I think that it's part of your assignment this week is to reflect on that. Strong and healthy. Well, for humans, relationships take a lot of skill because we're complicated. And you can see here that this is the image I like to use for reflecting on different kinds of personality types, because we're each like a facet of this. There were billions of facets to it. And each of the facets has a different perceptual frame. And the facet here sees things very different from the facet on the other side of that diamond. So the people around you here, you see things pretty much similar. Your perceptual view of the world is fairly similar, but way over there, it's not so similar. So one of the interesting things to absorb about relationships is that people are really different than we are, and we all have this like essential narcissism that says that we're a little better than everybody else. And that's sort of left over from when we were two. Because we're not, right? So these facets, like I said, they represent, this image to me represents the diversity of perceptual frames that people can have, and to open myself to be tolerant of different perceptual frames. That's not opening yourself to be tolerant of crap behavior. That's not the point. It's just different ways of seeing and viewing the world. This is that we get a serotonin burst from feeling righteous. Whenever we think we're better than somebody else, we actually get this serotonin hit. So that's one of the obstacles to recognizing like that. That's what we would call that in everyday language. We would call that an ego boost. And we want to watch out for that, right? One of the things that brings us the most ego boost is moral superiority, thinking that we're morally superior to others. But it just makes others feel distance from us when that happens. And we feel distance from the people that do that to us, right? So there's something to be aware of. So we learn from studying anger that it's wise to take a step back from righteousness. And this is a good perceptual, and really just relax back and look at people with amusement and curiosity is kind of like the bottom line message of these slides, right? Stop projecting your perceptual frame onto other people. Now, that does not mean that when you have an intimate relationship like your home, that you don't want things to, there to be certain kinds of ways that people operate. They're kind to each other, they're respectful to each other, these kinds of things, but people are still able to have their own uniqueness within that frame, right? So in this chapter of the text of the books, Hansen talks about that as we engage in the world of we, which we could describe as the I-thou relationship versus the I-it relationship. And you can see and feel within yourself when you turn the person that you're engaging with kind of into an it. When you're speaking to them as if you have an expectation that they do and behave a certain way because you want them to, but you've cut off really the deep respect, holding that person in a deep sense of respect. So the dance, the yin-yang dance, is to hold on to our sense of self while we're part of a group, right? Hold on to our unique autonomy as we work and allow other people to evolve and be without maybe fierce judgment. This relates to boundaries, which is about the fine art of asserting our needs while respecting the needs of others. So a lot of times if we frame boundaries in our head as pushing people away, we'll become uncomfortable if we're a nurturer or kindness is one of our values. We'll become uncomfortable with the idea of boundaries. But if we think about boundaries as asserting our needs while respecting other people's needs simultaneously, then it's a very generous give and take. It's generous because you're being authentic, you're being real, right? You're not being real. So that's a skill to be able to, if we're not used to asserting our boundaries, then it's a skill that we can grow and build, right? Because people who don't like conflict and tend to be nurturing types often don't assert their boundaries and stuff. And you can see this show up when you can suspect that it might happen whenever, like, not be saying no when you need to say no, or I'm sorry, I can't make that particular meeting or anything like that, right? So that's what we mean by boundaries. So from this week, we have some really neat reading assignments, and you have topics that you can choose from. Some of them are from web-based sources, so not all of them are from the chapter in the book, but one of them is staying grounded in me, not losing ourselves, and mutually respecting boundaries. There's empathy, being able to project and see from another person's perspective, interacting well with others using tools like deep listening, and testing your understanding is really a good one, which is, confirming what you heard the other person say or re-articulating it. So you make sure that you're on par with it. This is a counseling skill, this testing your understanding. It's like if somebody was describing their morning and all the things that happened to them in counseling, you would learn to paraphrase that in a way and look for what they really trying to communicate. So you might say, okay, so you found this morning maddening, and right now you're feeling really frustrated. So that would be one way of paraphrasing something. And somebody might come back and say, no, not really maddening, and I'm not really frustrating. I just wish it had gone differently, right? So what I had done as the counselor there was over emotionalize the situation, and what they're saying in there saying, no, I wasn't really, it wasn't maddening. It was just, I wish it had gone a little differently. What they're doing is they're clarifying for me. And that idea of getting clarity is a really good idea, because a lot of times we are not quite clear, right? We're a little bit off. So we're trying to understand a whole other being, a whole other mystery being. Okay, the idea of virtue, taking the high road in situations. And when you want a relationship to heal because you really care about someone, a lot of times taking the high road is the road that will lead to that healing. So, and then warm-heartedness towards our common humanity. So empathy is the ability to see from another person's point of view. It's the glue that enables us to connect, understand, cooperate, and collectively create. It fosters connection between two people. These two are very attuned. This dad is down at this kid's level, so they're eye to eye. And you can see he's resonating with how the child feels. And you can see the resonance here too. They have the same facial or similar facial expression. They're leaning towards each other. You can see it in their body language. When people are in resonance, it's neat to watch. Like if you go out into public, which we get to do again, you go out into public and you watch people, how they interact together, you can see resonance. You can see the people who are in resonance are like, they flow in their interactions together. People who are not in resonance are stiff together. And so what that means is that they're not feeling a lot of emotional connection. There could be a lot of reasons for that. They could be just distracted, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean it's defining the relationship, but you can observe this dynamic. And this idea that empathy is a skill that can be developed because it comes from an internal mechanism of our brain is really fun to know about, called mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are, you can see the mirror here, and the neuron is looking in the mirror. And mirror neurons are very fascinating. They're a kick to know. They're one of the most interesting findings of the last 20 years. So we're going to watch a fun video on mirror neurons. And what we'll be able to do at the end of this video is understand what mirror neurons enable us to do, what they're doing, what the mirror neurons in our brain are doing when we watch a movie, which tells us why we're so drawn to watch movies, TV shows, sports, to watch other people doing things. And mirror neurons are the source of blank. Okay, so here we go. I think you'll enjoy this. Gaze
into a mirror, and what do you see? Well, I see my face, of course, but in my face, I see moods, I see shifts of feeling. We humans are really good at reading faces and bodies, because if I can look at you and feel what you're feeling, I can learn from you, connect to you, I can love you. Empathy is one of our finer traits, and when it happens so easily, perhaps because, and this is brand new science, this is just out of the lab, we may have some special circuitry in our brains that helps us whenever we look at each other.
Just out of the lab like 15 years ago now.
Why do people
2012
so involved, so deeply involved with such anguish, such pain, such nail-biting tension over football?
It's really an interesting question if you think about it. Why do we get so involved?
Why are we such suckers for sports? And it's not just sports. We can lose it completely at the movies, at video games, watching a dance. Is there something about humans particularly, that allows us to connect so deeply when we watch other people? Watch them moving, watch them playing, watch their faces. Well, as it happens, scientists have an explanation for this strange ability to connect. It's new.
It had never been found on the cellular level.
A set of brain cells found on either side of the head. Among all the billions of long branching cells in our brain, these so-called mirror neurons have surprising power.
What we found is the mechanism that underlies something which is absolutely fundamental to the way that we see other people in the world.
And it began entirely by accident at a laboratory in the lovely old city of Parma, Italy, where a group of brain researchers was working with monkeys. And they were testing a neuron, let's say brain cell, that always fired, made this sound, whenever the monkey would grab for a peanut. So the lab had all these peanuts around, and whenever the monkey made its move, the neuron would fire. Scientists thought, now here's a neuron that is essential to motion. It's a motor neuron. Then one day, the monkey was just sitting around, not moving at all, just sitting, when a human scientist came into the lab. And when that scientist grasped the peanut, the monkey's cell fired. Now, the monkey had moved. It was the human that had moved, suggesting that this neuron up here couldn't tell the difference between seeing something and doing something. Seeing and doing were the same. Or more intriguingly, that for this neuron, watching somebody do something is just like doing it yourself. The head of the lab, Giacomo Rizzolatti, thought, wow.
The same neurons, one neuron, fire both when the monkey observes something and when monkey is doing something. It's almost unbelievable.
It was surprising because this cell which was involved with motor planning for the monkey turned out to be interested in the movements of other people as well.
Some people call them monkey see, monkey do neurons, but the name that stuck is mirror neurons, because with them, the brain seems to mirror the movements it sees. This accidental discovery got scientists thinking, doing more tests, and it soon became pretty clear that this is not just a monkey thing. It's a people thing, too. We all know that humans learn by looking and copying. That's what infants do. First you look, then you do. And once you've watched and copied and learned a set of moves, you not only have them in your head, if you see somebody else doing it, you can share the experience.
And you want to do it with me?
They know the moves, you know the moves, so you can move with them.
Wow.
If you can use the years of training that you yourself have done, learning to crawl, then learning to walk, then learning to eat, This is an incredibly rich set of knowledge that you could apply to the problem of actually seeing what's going on.
So that's why when I head down this street carrying all these packages, not only do people watch, look how they're watching.
They're empathizing, right?
Because they know what it's like to carry heavy packages. They all know about carrying. So as they watch me move, they can feel themselves moving. Their neurons are mirroring the action. These neurons may be the brain's way of translating what we see so we can relate to the world.
The mirror system is the way that you tap into, the way that you harness your own abilities and project them out into the world.
And people are really good at watching and translating what we see. Like with just 13 moving dots, that's all there are here, you'll have no trouble recognizing these very ordinary activities. What's more, tests have shown when a person sees a movie like this of his own movement, he'll recognize it immediately as his own. And that's why sports fans tense with the action and wince and leap, because if you know the game, then your neurons are firing as if it's you playing, giving a whole new meaning to the phrase armchair quarterback. That's why it's so easy to be a sports fan. But there is more, suggests UCLA professor Marco Iacoboni. He thinks mirror neurons tie us not just to other people's actions, but to other people's feelings.
So the idea was to try to figure out how the emotional system and this motor system are connected together. We're going to go in the scanner. What you're going to do is
to demonstrate, he put me into this very powerful fMRI brain scanner that can peer into the brain while it's working. And he gave me some goggles so he could show me pictures when I was in there.
So you can see here the eyeball of Robert.
And once he had a good view into my brain...
Nice looking brain.
Thank you.
Robert, you're not supposed to talk when we scan you, all right?
Sorry. Then he said, okay, I'm going to show you a bunch of faces. And for each face, I want you to imitate it. So I did that. Then he recorded my brain while I moved my facial muscles.
We're going to do right away another one.
Okay. Then he said, okay, same faces, but this time, don't move a muscle. Just look. So I looked. When we checked the results, oh, there's my brain. I've never seen my brain before.
This is your mirror area.
Iacoboni says that the part of my brain that's working when I make a face, the same part gets busy when I see the face. Plus, when I was looking at these faces, I remember feeling extra uncomfortable, kind of bad. But when these faces came on, I felt better, almost happy. And in fact, at the moment I was looking at the happy face, my brain, and this is my brain, in that instant, see the red area here? It shows activity in the happy emotional part of my brain. And when I was imitating happy faces, look, I get even a bigger response. This, says Iacoboni, is a consistent result. Mirror neurons, he believes, can send messages to the limbic or emotional system in our brains. So it's possible these neurons help us tune in to each other's feelings. That's empathy.
We strongly believe that that's a unifying mechanism that allows people to actually connect at a very simple level.
You're saying that there's a place in my brain whose job it is to live in other people's minds, live in other people's bodies.
That's right.
Oh, darling, I'm going to die. Don't let me die.
And great actors instinctively know that if they put feeling and drama into their bodies,
Hold me tight. Don't let me go.
their faces,
It's dark out there alone.
we will respond.
Die. You're too brave to die.
What actors are expert in is using their movements to inspire feelings in the people watching. These are the experts in the mirror system.
We are intensely social creatures. We literally read other people's minds. I don't mean anything psychic like telepathy, but you can adopt another person's point of view.
When you put it together, what do you think it's going to be?
So if mirror neurons help us connect emotionally, what about people who have trouble with this? Kids like Christian, who has autism.
Why do you like Legos?
It's been known for some time that children with autism could be quite intelligent, but have a profound deficit in social interaction.
There he is.
Christian can speak and read and write, but like many kids with autism, he will avoid eye contact. He often misunderstands questions.
So, Christian, can you tell me what you did in school today?
Doing well.
You're doing well?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants to know what exactly causes this. So Dr. Ramachandran and his graduate student, Lindsay Schenk, designed an experiment.
So we're going to be reading your brain waves with this cap.
They recorded brainwaves while the kids opened and closed their hands, and while they looked at a movie of somebody else's hands. For most people, the brainwaves look the same either way, whether they're doing or seeing. But for kids with autism, the wave changes, suggesting possibly that autism may have something to do with broken mirror neurons.
Their brains may indeed be different in that regard, and they may have deficits in the mirror neuron system. But we don't know for sure yet, and additional work needs to be done using brain imaging.
But what we do know, says Ramachandran, is that healthy human beings are intensely social. More than our cousins the monkeys, we invent ways to connect. We invent dances and handshakes and games to play. We eat together, we meet, and we talk. We talk a lot.
Get away. Everybody's interested in this question. What makes humans unique? What makes us different from the great apes, for example? You can say humor, you're the laughing biped. Language, certainly, okay? But another thing is culture. And a lot of culture comes from imitation, watching your teachers do something.
And here, V.S. Ramachandran makes a big leap. He has proposed that at a key moment in our evolution, this is his guess, our mirror neurons got better. And that made all the difference, he says, because once we humans got better at learning from each other, looking, copying, teaching, we could do things the other creatures couldn't.
In other words, if you are a bear and suddenly the environment turns cold, you need a few million years to develop polar bear type layers of fat and fur.
It would take many, many, many bear generations to select for furrier bears. But, says Ramachandran,
if you're a human, you watch your father slaying another bear and putting on a fur coat, skinning it, using that as a coat. You watch it, you learn it instantly. Your mirror neurons start firing away in your brain. And you perform the same sequence, complicated sequence. Instead of going through millions of years of evolution, you've done it in one generation.
And while no one's claiming that mirror neurons are the key ingredient that makes us different from other creatures, what these neurons do suggest about us seems almost self-evident. You can see it any Sunday at a sports bar, that deep in our architecture, down in our cells, we are built to be together.
There would be very little point in having a mirror system if you lived on your own. There'd be a lot of point in having a digestive system if you lived on your own. There'd be a good point in having a movement system if you lived on your own. There'd be a good point in having a visual system if you lived on your own. But there'd be no point in having a mirror system. The mirror system is the most basic social brain system. It's a brain system which there's no point in having if you don't want to interact or relate to other people.
But we do like to interact, and maybe now, as never before, we will understand why.
It's so interesting, these mirror neurons and their association with autism, right? That there may be a deficit that would enable us to read each other's faces and read each other's emotions because they're connected in the limbic system. And they're also, like if I said, fold a piece of paper in half, you can easily do that. Let's say if I was teaching you an origami thing, you could copy it with me because your brain is matching what it's seeing. And that learning ability of our brain to do that, both in terms of learning and in terms of reading other people's emotions and imagining what they're feeling. Now, when you see somebody having an emotion, you don't feel it usually at the same extent that they do. Your mirror neurons in your emotional system will show it a little bit, right? So you'll get a part of it so you know what they're feeling. So you see somebody's sad face, you feel a little bit of sadness. And so you can see from that thing also emotional contagion, how he was feeling happier when he was looking at the happy faces and sadder when he was looking at the sadder faces, that or more anxious. That's how we share and pass emotions back and forth to each other, right? Now, they actually call mirroring, when people are in resonance, their body movements and language and postures and stuff. You can see how they both have the elbow on the table. They both have their hand on their coffee cup. This happens more and more when people are in resonance. So it's something else that you'll start to notice, a kind of synchrony that they get in. You can see the mirroring here. These two are no longer in resonance, right? So we can match facial expressions and sort of emotional sort of countenances. So you can sort of watch people when you're in public and see the resonance. Now, just like that may or may not be there, just like you saw that the man and the boy, where the man was crouched down at the boy's eye level, we can build a feeling of resonance between ourselves and another person by sort of mirroring and being on the same page, so to speak, right? So here she's crouching down to speak with the child. But examples of this are when students come to visit me in my office. If I have an exuberant student, I might sit on the edge of my seat. If I have a student coming in more serious and maybe has some concerns, I'll sit back in my seat, just sort of matching a little bit where they are, trying to get on the same page with each other. It's called empathic attunement, is another name for it. So now we're going to look at some different kinds of personality types. And one of the biggest personality type tests that's used to look at some of the different kinds of personality traits that we have is called the Big Five. And the biggest thing about the Big Five, and what our takeaway is from it, is a central profiling matrix that they use, and a lot can be predicted from it for sure. But for our purposes, it's just to help us see a measurable spectrum of differences that are out there, so that we can start to imagine some of the people in our lives and how they might be a little bit different from us, and that these things are on a natural spectrum. So you might want to write down on a piece of paper your name, and then maybe one or two other people's names that you just want to sort of think about that are in your life, that you'd like to reflect on and understand a little bit better as we go through. Now, the Big Five, like I said, this is the #1 personality inventory in the world, and it's used for all kinds of profiling. So there's lots of information that it contains at a meta level. You can go into greater and greater levels of details with this, but the basics of it are simple, and it goes by this acronym OCEAN. So there's just 5 characteristics that are being looked at here. And this is where it's think about somebody you know, so that you can try to practice and yourself applying these to them. So the Big 5 traits, and we have a slide for each one, so you don't have to write them down right now, but this is just to get the forest through the trees. And these are ones where scientists, I mean, they've narrowed it down to 5, in some ways somewhat arbitrarily, but there's a lot of scientific research behind these 5, that they do exist as a spectrum of differences among people, and that there may be some biological dimension to them, some genetic predisposition to each of these. Although we can still change. I mean, any genetic predisposition is only 50% of the story. The other 50% of the story is our environmental experiences and what we do. So nature is not destiny, as they say. So the first one is open to new experiences. This is for the O. So this is OCEAN. Well, I changed the N here because the word they use is neuroticism, and we want to, the more current word is emotional stability and emotional sensitivity. So open to new experiences, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and emotional stability. So we'll be looking at the people in your life that you wrote about and yourself, and you can reflect on what's interesting to see is the differences between you and them. So when you do a scale like this, you take something like openness to new experiences, or people who like change, like variety and change, and they like to try new things. And then there's people who like the tried and true. They like to do the same things all the time. They like consistency and patterns, right? So that's the other end of the scale. So it can be in the middle, or it can be an extreme of one or the other side, right? So you could be extremely creative and extremely want new experiences. People who need to have a lot of variety and change, people who don't, that would be high. Low on openness would be you want everything the same. And then there's a lot of gradation in the middle. So we want to realize that for all of them, is that there's one side, the other side, and then a lot in the middle. And we may land in the middle of something. And when we land in the middle of a trait, we kind of can get both sides. When we're extreme on a trait, like if we're extremely into adventure, variety, change, then we have a really hard time. We find the people who like things the same all the time annoying, right? So those people, we would have to expand our ability to be willing to sort of reflect on the value of their point of view. So when something exists with a biological foundation to it, the assumption is that there's an evolutionary advantage to these traits. Okay, so now we'll go through them. Why does it say 3? Openness to new experiences. And they're both good. It's like neither of these are bad or good. That's the whole point. They exist because nature likes both of them here, right? They seem to have a value to human survival for the variety to be there. So these would be our adventurers, people who like change, variety, things to be new and different. They want to go to a different restaurant every time. They like to try new and different meals. These people like things predictable and the same. They like to go to the same restaurants, and they like the same set of friends and things like that. And Mr. Rogers is a wonderful example of low openness to experience. So you can see that it's not a negative thing to have, they're both good. So the second one is conscientiousness. O for openness. The second thing is C, right, for our OCEAN acronym. And the second one is conscientiousness. So conscientiousness is, organized and industrious, takes care of stuff or gets distracted and is less organized, right? So likes to get a lot of stuff done, very orderly, high conscientiousness, sensitive to deadlines and time, cares about deadlines and time, and then less conscientious, less organized, less orderly. Organized is one of the subtraits, and industrious is another subtrait of conscientiousness. And industrious means that conscientious people like to get tasks done, like paying the bills and things like that. They feel good about getting those tasks done, whereas less conscientiousness people don't like getting those tasks done. And, is there a cross correlation between these? Yes. People who tend to be higher in conscientiousness tend to be a little lower in openness to new experiences, right? So they tend to like things pretty tried and true. So there's advantage. Every one of these, like we're all strong in some and weak in others, and we'll probably go, oh my gosh, that explains a lot. Most people are somewhat in the middle on conscientious, but the people in your life, and maybe it's you who are really high. You get everything done. You get the bills paid on time. You're on time. You show up on time. Your stuff is pretty neat and taken care of. You're on top of your business. Whereas people in lower conscientiousness, they don't get as much reward for that. They don't get as much internal reward. You like to do certain hobbies because you get internal reward for it. Well, these things are also internally rewarding things. So it's not like you designed yourself this way when you created yourself. No, you just landed this way, right? You just came out, however, whatever combination you've got, mixed with environment. And so now here you are. And because of neuroplasticity, we can grow on any of these traits. I always have to grow on conscientiousness. My sister is on top. This is my sister's desk. Totally. She's on top of everything. I, on the other hand, am sort of more in the middle. Like I'm in the lower middle. So I have to push myself. I don't tend to run on time. I have a difficult time with, handling paperwork and bills. Like I don't want to approach that stuff at all. And being here is probably me working at it. steadily because I'm pretty high in openness to experience. Sorry about that 3 there. I'm pretty high over here. So again, those tend to cross correlate a little bit. So the next trait, so it's interesting. So go ahead and write down for your 2 people, and you can write a scale like, let me get a piece of paper. You can do something like this, like you take your piece of paper and you would write down Joe or whoever, right? And then you write down a line and you would say high. Oh, high is over here, low is over here. Okay. And then you would just sort of go with the trait of openness. And then you would just mark them. Are they high? Are they low? Put a little X. And you can have one for you, you know, where am I on this, right? And then we go to the next trait, which is conscientiousness. And the first one might be Joe is really low. You know what I mean? So as we go through, you can just do a little scale for each person so that you can sort of rank them and rank yourself. And this is just generic because you can take this test online. I think there's a link to take. Yes, there is a link. So most people fall in the middle on conscientiousness somewhere. Most of us are less conscientious than we would like to be. And we definitely live in a culture that rewards conscientiousness big time. So, you know, the more work and organized and on top of things you are. So this is something that most people have to build on. And if you already have this as a trait, congratulations. And of course, going off the scale on this is like OCD, right? Going way over here where you're way too. So all of these have off the scale. Like when somebody's too openness to experience, they're just everywhere. They're all over the place. That's the term we use for them. When they don't have enough openness to experiences, again, we move into that sort of rigid sort of way of being, right? So there's the range of sort of being productive or effective, and then there's going a little bit overboard where we start to have a harder time with life. So extroversion is about, both extroverts and introverts like being with people. So we don't want to say that extroverts like people more. They like to spend more time with people because they get energized being with people, whereas introverts get more energized being alone. And extroverts also work through their problems by talking, and introverts work through their problems by thinking them through. So the extroverted partner wants the introverted partner to talk to them, and they make an assumption that the introverted partner isn't connecting or sharing, or that they're withholding, because the extroverted partner would want to talk to work through their problems. And they're assuming that the introverted partner would also want to talk to work through their problems, right? So you can see how with awareness, we can give each other some space. We can allow for these differences to exist. You know, extroverted people usually get together with somebody who's sort of opposite them on at least one trait. So usually in relationships, like, so, and so that'll often be the point of conflict between 2 people. But if you understand how it works and you understand each other's needs, and you can relax back a little bit and allow yourself to be appreciative rather than condemning of somebody who's different from you. The extrovert will need to be willing to go do some things socialize with people independently to meet some of their extroversion needs. And so will the introvert person need to be able to allow that. Extroverted people usually have a wide range of connections, and introverted people have a smaller, more intimate group of connections. They like one-on-one, as it points out here, and extroverts tend to like time with larger groups of people. So the idea is to be respectful of the differences that we have within us. Now, none of these are looking at people who are unhealthy, or people who are, say, bullies, or, well, kind of. I mean, the 4th trait is agreeableness. And agreeableness is being friendly, kind, having nurturing characteristics, being compassionate, good-natured, pretty forgiving, right? And then less agreeable people they tend to be cranky, they tend to be critical, and they get to the point, they're direct, you know, in their languaging, and they tend to be a little bit more judgmentally oriented. And, you know, we need, like, for example, there are certain professions that rely on low agreeableness, like, not the medical profession. This is House, a major character from a while back, who was very, very cranky and surly. And if you are a highly agreeable person who is quickly hurt by those kinds of people who are direct and to the point and don't take care of emotions in their communication, it's helpful to watch that TV show House, because it'll teach you how people learned, how the characters learned how to interact with this surly doctor. We can expect people who are low in agreeableness to be critical and negative, so that we don't have to take it so personally. It's how they are. And in fact, when you see the characters in this TV show with this brilliant doctor who's also really disagreeable person, when you watch the characters grow, they grow by taking it less personally, this disagreeable and sort of the snarky comments that this character House will make. Now, fields like law require a less agreeable person. Lawyers have to argue and fight and take stands. And so if you're super nurturing, gets in the way, right? Because you're going to have too much compassion for your opponent's point of view. And you can imagine how less agreeableness would be a strain that would run in as an evolutionary advantage from the standpoint of survival, because back in the earlier days, when we're living in the wild, we have to have some people who are willing to go out and fight, right? Fight the elements of nature, go bear fight and stuff. And they tend to be less agreeable types. And then we have emotional sensitivity. This is vulnerability in particular to the negative emotions. And this is something that, like, we can be born in the middle of this and then be in an inflamed environment, and it'll put us more in the inflammatory area where we're feeling hypersensitive. And then we can do self-care strategies where we're doing things like breathing, meditation, self-nurturing, the many different kinds of ways we can take care of ourselves that we've been learning in this class, ways that we can, things that nourish our own soul that we can do, and we can become less emotionally sensitive. So there's all the way to being ultra cool, calm, and collected, can regulate emotions, all the way to the other end. I need a better example. I don't know if you guys even remember Woody Allen. But he was a neurotic character. He always played a neurotic character. So if you guys have any suggestions for modern day neurotics that are that they use on TV shows and stuff that people might recognize, throw them in the chat. These are people who feel, I mean, this is, Woody Allen is sort of a caricature, but that idea of being hyper emotionally sensitive. This is partly a genetic predisposition, but we can help ourselves armor up a little bit and get a little bit emotionally stronger. So here's those 5 traits. And then you can see low indicator, high indicator, just some of the words. With here you see neuroticism, so it makes OCEAN. And because neuroticism is sort of got a stigma attached to it, now they use the word emotional sensitivity or vulnerable to negative emotions. And but it makes it trickier because of the acronym, right? So you have not easily bothered, secure, emotionally resilient, all the way to tense, moody, anxious, sensitive, prone to negative. I was definitely down here for sure during my, I would say my late 20s. I mean, definitely, I'm not completely, because I have an optimistic countenance, but I still had a lot. I mean, my neuroticism indicator has shifted from probably about here all the way, I would say, to here. So, you know, you can do a lot of growth shifting yourself in terms of this as a person and become much more secure and resilient and sort of feel okay. It was a journey though, but I would say you can definitely, I want to encourage everybody that you can shift that. So now we're going to look at we just learned some insights about relationships now, and now we'll scroll through some psi hacks about relationships. The first we've already alluded to, which is be curious. Replace judgmentalism for curiosity is probably my favorite way to think about it. And I love to, because, we're naturally judgmental. I mean, we're designed to decide that we like this, we don't like that. And then we have a negativity bias. So we're going to overemphasize what we don't like. And then we're going to project that onto the other person. So I don't like this or that about that. And if we think too much about that, if we say to ourselves, oh, this person is X, Y, Z, if we define them in a certain way in our heads, oh, he's such an a-hole or something like that, then we cut off the spectrum of how they really are, right? Now, there's some people who are not, we want to be more precise. And we all, like exactly what ways are they problematic? And we also want to be, with most people, more like if people are damaging or destructive, you want to get away from them. You want to find ways to protect yourself from that. But if it's just your everyday skirmishes that we have with people we know and care about because our mind is projecting a judgment, it's nice to take a step back, relax back, and look at them with amused curiosity. This is one of my favorite exercises with my partner and my mom, to just sit back and look at them from a larger perspective, as if they were, and my son too, like as if I didn't really know them all that well. And the miraculousness of how they are as a being, just seeing them without me narrowing them down and defining them so much, right? Letting them still, we're all more like rivers than we are things. We're in the process of becoming. The second thing is something that everybody should know, and it's the magic relationship ratio, and it's from some relationship science that's pretty irrefutable. And it's basically that we need 5 positive experiences between ourselves and another. And these are micro moments, passing each other in the hall, and, just micro moments of how you're feeling about each other. And we need 5 positive ones for every negative one because of the negativity bias, which gives you an idea of the strength of negativity bias. When they start getting equal, when you start having 5, you bicker 5 times and you have a positive moment 5 times, it's still not good enough for our brain to tag that relationship as positive. We need 5 positive moments. And this is extremely helpful because it can teach us to disrupt a pattern that might be starting of negativity and start injecting some gratitude, appreciation, expressions of respect, expressions of affection, in order to, those are the glues of the relationship, expressions of trying to get on the same page with each other. All those things, expressions of honoring, all those things will enable us to tag a relationship as a good thing, right? So knowing that, we can alter, like instead of complaining, we might express appreciation, just to keep our ratio up when we don't necessarily need to complain. There are always times when we need to complain, but a lot of times we don't. We can just switch it. And this is that idea of emotional money in the bank. When we invest in sort of nurturing a relationship or nurturing the good in a relationship, that relationship develops this invisible bank account that you draw on when you go through conflict. So if a relationship has a lot of positives in its bank account, when we experience conflict together, then we're able to move through it better than when the relationship is depleted of positive experiences and feelings of connection with each other. So we want to avoid this thing called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which is 4 mistakes we make in relationships, which are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Criticism is when we put the other person down instead of basically ask for the change that we want, or express a need and ask for the change, and do it respectfully. Contempt is when we start to project that we don't like that person. I don't like you, and so we want to shift that to a culture of appreciation. Defensiveness is when we feel like somebody's attacking us. And a way to offset feeling defensive within yourself, I can't say enough how much it helps to ask yourself the question, how can I help myself feel better? Because the more that you learn, and then, you know, you'll get an answer, you'll get some kind of answer, you know, like a part of you will say, well, you know, we need a break, you know, or we need a change, or we need a nap, or, you know, or we need a bath, or we need to have some fun. You know, you'll hear this. And if you ask yourself this regularly, then you'll develop an interior world that believes that it can count on you. And you'll feel less defensive when people are, when you feel sensitive about people are putting you down. And one of the, or might be saying something that you take personally. And we can, when we feel more secure inside, instead of being defensive, we can instead become curious. Like it becomes less about us and more about the other person. And we can also allow ourselves to be fallible, right? We don't have to be so perfect. You know, I used to have that problem really bad where I was super sensitive to my partner's criticism. And it was like, he was like, gosh, you know, just because I'm making this criticism doesn't mean you're still amazing. You're still great. This is just a small thing, but you act like it's a huge thing. And it would be like, he would say this one thing and I would feel like that was the whole thing. And what happened was that slowly I started saying, you know what, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to be someone who is open to learning about how they can be better. I don't have to feel defensive about not being perfect. It was like an epiphany. And so it slowly started to decrease, right? And I started to feel less annoyed or reactive to him saying, you know, I don't like it when you do this, right? Or whatever it might be, right? So that's what they mean by take responsibility. Take responsibility for the fact that you don't have to be perfect. So you don't have to be defensive. And then stonewalling is when we're flooded in a conversation or in a relationship when we need to take a break or they need to take a break. And what we need to be willing to do is allow that break and allow the pause, and let each other know when we'll come back to reconnect and decide if that's the time or if we need to take another pause. And in the meantime, you do psychological self-soothing instead of ruminating about what you're pissed off about, right? We want to remember our brain on mad. So when we're catching ourselves being angry, and I know this takes some energy at first, because anger energy has a lot of energy to it. And so we can remind ourselves, what do I need to feel better? I want to feel better. What do I need to feel better? And sometimes that is reaching out to someone to help us work through a really difficult situation or troubleshoot a problem relationship. So this has been a big lesson for me because what'll happen is I'll get annoyed for something, then I'll feel righteous, and then I'll go and communicate from that state of annoyance and righteousness. And that usually leads to a bust. So I have learned to be a little bit more humble. And again, this isn't healthy relationships. This isn't relationships with people who are bullying or domineering or untrustworthy. Those kinds of relationships, you need a whole nother set of rules to navigate those relationships. And I think the best way is to reach out to, if you're dealing with something like that, and get some social support and some guidance through that particular style of relationship that you found yourself in. This is like 85-90% of our relationship experiences will follow these rules, but 10 to 15% of the time they won't. And we'll need a new set of rules for managing those relationships. When people are destructive and unhealthy, we have to manage those situations. And so we have to learn a whole nother set of criteria, boundaries, and usually we could use with a coach that coaches us on that. And we call mental coaches counselors. So, but these will be most of them. You know, so gentle startup is a beautiful thing. I have really learned the value of this. And I've learned that when I start to feel annoyed and pissed off, and then I'll project out and I'll go, oh, you know, this person is bad for this, for doing this. and this would be somebody in my life, like my mom, my son, but this is very simplified languaging, right? It'll be a more sophisticated words in my head, I'll be like, but whatever it is, that is a cue for me that I need to withdraw and come to peace inside myself, and basically come back to a place of seeing the wholeness of that person instead of reducing them to this slice that irritated me before I approach them. So I want to approach them from the wholeness and bring up the slice. I don't want to approach them just from the slice. That usually works way, way, way better. Now, occasionally we're going to have those things where we flare up and they flare up, and that's that. But we don't want that to be the rule. We want gentle approach to be the rule. So being clear about your intention, and that usually takes taking a step back so that your intention isn't to let them know what an idiot you think they are, but it becomes something a little bit more sophisticated. Like, when I got home and the place was a mess, it was really so hard for me. It was so upsetting. My heart broke. And I know you want to do your best here, and it would really help me if, right? Now, there's two assumptions there. One is that they want to do their best, and two, they'd be interested in helping you. If they don't, then another set of rules, because you're working with somebody who doesn't have your best interests in mind, then that's those relationships that need to be managed, because it's your job to make sure you have your best interests in mind, right? So that's that about harsh. And then repair. We don't realize this, but we're in a complicated, challenging world with lots of stressors. We make lots of little relationship faux pas, myself included. I still snap at my husband when I'm under a lot of pressure. We can get into a squabble. We just had a little squabble last night, but they're really short now. They're over in like 5 minutes instead of 8 hours because we've learned some of these skills to not escalate, right? And one of them is repair, which is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. My bad is a great repair. Or, hey, can we start over? Or anything like that. But repair, again, allowing yourself to be humble enough that these things are okay. We have sort of this insistence that we do everything right. We get this training in school that we need to get the right grades, we need to get the right answers, we need to do it all right. So if everybody says you didn't do it right, we're like, what? Whereas it's like instead of being like, okay, no problem, how do I do it right? You know what I mean? We're very reactive, and part of that is the cultural conditioning that's always saying do it right or you're going to be punished. Not a good thing. So we need to be willing to gentle with ourselves and not internalize into our own head that we always got to do it right, which I had done. I'd internalized that, and as I gentled that demand on me, it was easier for me to experience these things and allow the natural humility to come forward. So these are some sample repair phrases. And it's really nice to look up phrases. If you have a hard thing that you want to say, somebody's figured out a great way to say it. If you have a hard question you need to ask, somebody's figured out a great way to phrase that question. So don't be afraid. How do I talk about da 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 da? And there's wonderful works out there on how to have difficult conversations and things like that that really give us some nice tools and words that because it really helps if you have the right words. It's a lot easier to set a boundary if you have the right words for it, and say it. I don't like the thing, I mean, that some of the times I hear boundary languaging that seems kind of aggressive to me, and I like to find boundary languaging that's very honorable, both of me and the other person. And these are examples of repair phrases this is Ho'oponopono. And if you guys like, you can watch the video on it and stuff. It's really beautiful. It's a Polynesian, basically a mantra. And it's very, very beautiful. And there's more to it. It's a philosophy about approaching life and approaching relationships with a certain humility, right? And a willingness to say these 4 phrases of I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. Beautiful phrases to become comfortable with saying with those close to you, right? So it's neat to check into Ho'oponopono, clarifying your intentions. Really helpful to be clear on who we want to be in our relationships, how we want to be experienced in our relationships. I mean, think about it, you guys. How many people you wish that that you wish would reflect on how they want to be experienced by others, you know? So be one of those who has made a decision. And so again, because we're human and there's a million things going on, we're not always going to be right on the mark. There's that humility, there's that allowing the imperfect. Um, but we can set a target that matters to us about how we want to be experienced in relationships. And we can continually check and amend and catch ourselves when we're not quite on that target and get ourselves back on the target. And then this is the closing slide about you can be a master of relationships. Okay, now for your end of the slideshow quiz question, which is, what was your favorite thing that you learned in this slideshow? I'm going to buzz through while you insert that into the chat. All right. We started with this idea of the prism so that we have that perceptual image about, relaxing back and accepting that people are really different, to watch out for the serotonin hit of righteousness and being better than. We don't want to get feeling good from being better than others. And we talked about that there's going to be some information in your assignment that looks at things like boundaries, staying grounded in me while being part of we is about boundaries. And we looked at empathy, and that empathy, that we can see resonance, which says that these two people are empathically attuned. So we can watch that we can build empathy, that it's a skill that we can nourish and build, and that it comes from mirror neurons. And there's actually a distribution of mirror neurons amongst people. And mirror neurons are, people will say things like they shrink time and space. So if you make a facial expression at me, across whatever miles, I can see from your face what you're feeling, right? So that's the idea about mirror neurons, which are fascinating. So if you make a face and I was feeling something, if I'm feeling happy, I have a signal for that. When I see you feeling happy, it triggers the same signal. So I have a feeling of what you're feeling from your facial expressions, right? So we really are mind reading, but more emotion reading, and that people's body language matches each other when they're in resonance, and that we can actually do that on purpose a little bit. We can, to get on the same page is the phrasing I like to use, getting into sort of attunement with one another, we can shift and adapt so that people feel more trusting of you when that happens. And then we looked at the big five, just getting a sense of some of the ways that we're different. And the point of this is to become more tolerant and understanding of each other's differences, rather than critical of them, and figuring out how you can work with them, right? So the open to new experiences, consciousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and emotional sensitivity, also known as neuroticism. And so here the five of them are there. So that's a helpful thing to know about, because it can help us ease back on some of our judgmentalism of people who are quite differently than we are, and we can think about them with curiosity instead of so much condemnation, which is the first point here. And then we have the information from Gottman's research on relationships, the magic relationship ratio, emotional money in the bank, avoiding the four horsemen. These are the things that break relationships down, okay, that make them. So it's not like they're not going to occasionally happen. They are, but we want to reduce their happenings, right? We want to evolve to where they're not happening as much. Remember that our brain on mat is a red brain, and we want to shift it over. So if we're in a red brain, we're not thinking clearly. We don't want to approach a challenging conversation from an angry brain. We want to get clear on our intentions and be able to be in the space where we can be focusing not just on the sliver that we're annoyed with, but the whole being, and then approach the whole being with the sliver instead of approach the being as if they are just the sliver that we're pissed off about. And then repair, shifting our perspective and realizing that reconnecting through apologies, mea culpas, those kinds of things are a natural part of healthy relationships. This is what Gottman's research found. and some repair phrases in the Ho'oponopono idea for repairing, clarifying our intentions so that we have a guiding light in terms of how we want to be in relationships. You know, I like to, in the shorthand of my guiding light is I, thou, meaning when I catch myself turning that person into less of a whole being, I want to pull back and try to regain the I, thou. Remember, this was by Martin Buber, who was a sociologist who talked about the I, thou relationship where we're approaching the other with deep respect. You can think namaste as compared to the I, it, where that person is now something to meet what I want. They're not doing what I want. So you're now in it. So, and then that we can all improve and increase our skills at relationships. So that's it, everybody. Thank you all so much for showing up here today. I love reading these. Oh, the ocean acronym, Neurons. Yeah. Exactly why you can't watch Phil videos. Exactly. You're sensitive to feeling that pain. You feel that pain, right? You're sensitive then. The prism and the serotonin hit right on. It's so interesting. I just love how people pick up other things. Introverts and extroverts, right on. Yes, exactly. And of course, you get blamed for it if you're surrounded by, you got a family of extroverts and you're the introvert, pain in the butt. Unless that family of extroverts goes, okay, we can respect this introvert way. That's the value of understanding each other's way, right? So we can step back and not go, yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you. Blessings to everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for coming. You all are the best. We only have like a few more weeks. Did you know that? 4 weeks. 4 weeks. See you all soon.